Hey everybody, in this episode of Roma Custom Bike, we'll take apart and reassemble again the front Springer forks on a softail from 1991. Hey everybody, I'm Custom Cez, and in this episode of Roma Custom Bike we're gonna take apart and reassemble the Springer forks for this 91 softail. I'm here with my friend Janusz Polsky Rage Wilczek that will give me a hand for this job because it's a two-people job. He's got a 2004 Deuce softail, for which we'll do a great project in an upcoming episode. We're going to replace the original tank with a Sportster tank using the fuel pump from the Sportster, lowering the tunnel, a very cool customizing project that you don't find so much about on the net. So get ready to look for that one episode coming soon on the Roma Custom Bike channel. But let's get started with part one. To favor the indexing of this video, we've decided to divide the episodes in two parts. The first part will be the disassembly, and part two will take care of reassembling this Springer fork. So let's get started. In order to take apart a Springer fork, you have to be able to compress the lower springs to relieve the pressure from the top springs that, when you unbolt the two top bolts, would spring into somebody's face, and that would be really no fun at all. To do so, we need a spring compressor, much simpler from the one we built for the rear shock absorbers. In this case, all you need is a threaded rod, a piece of metal with a hole in the center, a thick one perhaps, a couple of washers, and a couple of bolts. With this tool we'll be able to compress the bottom spring and release the top one. So let's get started by uninstalling the headlight and using the headlight fixture hole to hook up our compressor. Let's get started. To begin, we're gonna take apart the headlight. As you can see, I've already removed the handlebars. Each one of us will remove the handlebar according to what handlebar they got. That's a very simple task that you guys can figure it out. So we remove the screws and bolts, and I suggest you to put everything back together, all the screws and bolts back together to where they belong, so that you will not have trouble when reassembling. I also suggest you to put everything in a clean space. This could be cleaner, but it'll do. Then we take apart the little bracket that holds in place the headlight. In my case, it's a Helen head, and it's fairly easy to remove. There you go. Again, keep everything together. A good trick is to find a piece of paper tape, put the parts together, and maybe label them with their position. In this case, headlamp bracket. So you'll be sure to find everything back once you want to reassemble. Now we have to proceed removing the shock absorber. To do that, we loosen the bolts, remove the washer. So we're removing both sides with all the washers, putting them back together, and I suggest to label these as well. Now all we have to do is remove the shock absorber by shimming it out. There you go. Okay, so now it's time to remove the wheel, the front fender, and the brake. Each one of us pretty much has a different system, I believe. So in this case, I'm just gonna proceed with taking it apart, and each one of you, please do the same. So now we need to compress the bottom springs with our tool to release the pressure that is now compress the top springs and take them apart. So what we do, we screw in the hole that was holding the bracket that holds the headlight, our threaded rod, and with that we put a bolt on top of it. Then all we need to do is put another bolt through the bottom holder of the shock absorber to make sure that this cannot come out forward once it's compressed, and we start tightening the assembly. Before we can compress the spring compressor, we need to remove the rocker arm. To do so, I have already loosened these bolts. We remove the front bolt, the washer, and we slide this out. Janusz is holding this in place because this could swing forward. And what I'll do, I'll put back the screws and the bolts in the right place. Now we proceed with unbolting the back. I've already loosened everything, but you probably need wrenches. And removing the back bolt, again maybe with a rubber hammer. Remember to mark how everything goes, because it's otherwise gonna be a nightmare when you have to reassemble. Label everything you're removing right now with some paper tape, and believe me, you'll be thanking me later. So, rocker, we proceed with tying the front and the back with some wire so Janusz can let go of the forks. We proceed with the other side, and then we'll compress the spring. Let's go. Okay, now we need to proceed and compress. Janusz is holding the top of the threaded rod so it won't spin on me. We're compressing the bottom springs to release the compression on the top springs so that we can disassemble them. So as soon as the top springs are free, we can proceed and take them apart. So now that our bottom springs are compressed, the top one can come off without springing out of their position as soon as we loosen the bolts. So what we're going to do is remove the two top screws that are holding the little bridge in place. Remember to label everything as soon as you have a chance. And before taking apart this top bolt, what we're going to do is measure how much of a threaded rod is sticking out from the top bolt. In our case, about 10 millimeters. We're going to note this in our book. Let me see. Yes, both of them 10 millimeters. We're going to note that because once we reassemble the spring fork, we're going to want these bolts to go back down and expose 10 millimeters of threaded rod again. So we're sure we're in the same level of compression as when we took them off. So now that we measured, we put it in our book and we can proceed with uninstalling the two top springs. There you go. We remove the washer and the rubber bushing. Again, we put everything neatly together so that we can find it again once it's time to reassemble everything. So we're now decompressing the bottom springs by now releasing the bottom bolt that we have used to compress them, so that we can release the entire assembly from the bottom. All that's left to do is remove the threaded rod. These are now free. We just need to remove the fil di ferro to set them completely free. Now we can remove the two retaining washers with their bushings, the upper springs, and the inside spring. So now all we have left is to remove this bottom assembly right here that is going to free the two rods, and as a consequence the two bottom springs. There we go. We keep the assembly together and we proceed with the other side. Now that we have removed the front spring fork, we can set it aside and proceed with removing the fixed fork, the rigid fork, by removing the top plaque and setting it free. Now that we have removed the two big screws that keep the plaque in place, we can remove it and expose the big bolt that keeps the fork tight to the neck. We can get a pair of big pliers and start unscrewing that. Now that we have removed the main bolt from the neck of the bike, we can remove the rigid fork, making sure we keep all the bearings in place. So that's pretty much it. In this first part of this Roma Custom Bike episode, we've taken apart the Springer fork, and stay tuned for the second part where we're gonna reassemble it. So I'm Custom Cez, this is Janusz, Polsky Rage, Wilczek, and we'll see you in just a few seconds.